When I started like searching for meaning and for depth and for fulfillment, it was, well, there has to be a different way than like the church. But when you go down the new path, you realize it's a hodgepodge of all these different spiritual traditions in the New Age community. What I've seen, the beauty that comes with just such a wonderful, free thinking community and really weird stuff.
All right, welcome to All Things Possible. Adam here with my wife, Bethany.
Hey.
Today, we're going to be joined by Ali Tate, and we're going to be discussing a part of culture that we have not dived in too much before. And the reason we are doing this is because at All Things Possible, we want to have intentional conversations about things that we need to face, things that we need to encounter and develop a mindset towards, and understanding other people so that we can love our neighbors and share the love of Christ with them. So today we're going to be talking about New Age practices. Ali's been on a spiritual journey that has brought her to church now. So we're really excited to share this conversation with you. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review, hit subscribe, and share this with others who may be encouraged by what you're about to hear. And one last thing, we just want to give a word of warning that this conversation, if you're around your children, ask that you put your headphones on. We're having an adult conversation around topics that are going to be, just probably not the best for young ears. But
basically 21 and over.
Important for us to discuss. So as we jump into this conversation with Ali, I'm going to leave this verse with y'all to think upon, because the New Age religion or spirituality is seeking a way to find God. And in John, I believe it's John, let me just double check here. Yes, John 14, verse 6, it says, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Let that remind us that let's seek God. Let's know God through his son, Jesus. And there we find truth and life. So join us as we discuss the lies in this culture that are pulling us away from the truth and the life.
And you know what? It makes me think a little bit about, you can test whatever is happening in today's culture and world around us with God's word. You can test if it's true and good and right by looking into God's word and what he says about these different things. Today's conversation is really interesting, and we hope you guys enjoy it.
Well, Ali, thank you so much for joining us. First off, you have a child, a 3-year-old, right? Our children are with Grandma and Grandpa. What's your son doing right now as you're joining us?
He's at daycare right now, which is like 5 minutes from our house.
Perfect.
And since launching this business, I had like lots of different thoughts about daycare. I'm sure you guys do too.
For sure.
But we put him in like maybe a year ago nearby us, and he's just like thriving. His social skills have come online. Now I'm able to run my business. We pick him up at 4. Husband gets him. Second baby is going to totally change the game though. We're going to have like a whole different issue.
It totally is a big adjustment. Like, I'll just give you a quick forewarning. Like, it's a big adjustment going from 1 to 2. I think that was probably one of the harder transitions for us, but
and it's hard
3
to compare.
was a lot. We endured it, and he just turned 10 this weekend, so
crazy. I didn't know you guys had 3 kids.
We have
4 children now.
Wait, stop! You have 4 kids.
We have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and it's just such a fun adventure.
Wow. Were the boys born all like close to each other in age? What point did the girl?
They were like 2.5 years apart, so kind of enough to kind of get a bearing on life.
10, 7, 4, and baby girl's almost 2.
2.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's been a beautiful journey. Like, talk about like learning about yourself and letting, I don't know, just letting life kind of like take you where it's going to take you, and realize the gift that God gives through children. And I think there's something just so beautiful about it. And you're expecting number 2 any day now, right?
I feel like any second.
Oh
Yeah,
my
any
God.
second now. So thanks so much for
Thanks for
jumping
making
on
the time.
to All Things Possible. We're so excited to talk about today's conversation. It's been on my mind for years now. And now that we've launched a podcast, I knew as soon as we launched the podcast that I wanted to kind of dive into this topic. And so you've been writing a lot on your social media. You've written some articles. I would love for you to kind of like take us back into your journey from, I don't know, young adult life to like now. You've had just such an incredible journey of full on in with the New Age movement and a lot that comes with that, different types of ceremonies, channeling, plant medicines, or could also be considered drugs in some aspects. And yeah, I would love to just kind of like dive in.
Cool. Let's do it. So yeah, I was modeling for, I guess, 10, 12 years. I was a plus size model. I grew up, by the way, I grew up and I went to a Catholic high school, but my family's Jewish. So I'd had like kind of Judeo-Christian biblical roots, but really kind of grew up in a, let's like call it open thinker family. So we would like, we would look into Buddhism, we'd look into Hinduism, we'd look into lots of different spiritual ideas and texts. And then by the time I'd become a model, which was when I was 21, I entered this like plus size modeling competition. I initially did it to get back at an ex-boyfriend, by the way, who I wanted him to think I was cute and write me back. That's why I did that competition. and then ended up just modeling for like 10, 12 years. So in that time when I was modeling, it was going really well. I was like working with, the best photographers, best brands in the world. There was a time period where I'd experienced cancellation online. So what we'd call like cancel culture. Mm-hmm. So something I'd said kind of just like blew up. And in that period, I think it was 25 at the time. In that period, I had suicide ideation. I was just like, I was in such a dark, deep place. And it was really kind of like the first like real hard thing I had to deal with in my life. I'd already met the guy who's still my husband. We've been married for 15 or 16 years now. And in that kind of, let's call it like dark night of the soul for 2 years, where I was like, I'm a terrible person. Everyone hates me on the internet. I'm questioning all of my thoughts. I'm wondering, is there something wrong with me? Was when the New Age ideas started to come in. And my parents at that time, my dad had prostate cancer. And he was told, okay, you have months left to live. And it was right around that time that I started looking at something called the Gerson therapy, which was a juice fasting. Yeah, it was like, I think his name is Max. No, not Max Gerson, something Gerson. Yeah. And his granddaughter still runs it. And it was the premise that food could either hurt you or heal you. Mm-hmm. And my parents had run a fondue restaurant. They were eating lots of meat, lots of cheese, like lots of high, I would say processed food. Wasn't a great diet. At that time, my dad started juice fasting, which led into a guy called Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who's a fascinating character. I really like this guy, but he's like really interesting. Yeah. And he runs this thing called the Tree of Life. And my dad's cancer turned from like he has months left to live to like he rehabilitated in 1 year his diabetes type 2 and his prostate cancer. And so at that time, the whole family started going, okay, like fringe, what's in the fringe? Yeah. Or we're questioning the medical system, we're questioning the government, we're questioning all these different things. And my mind started to get open. I'm like actually going to just like take you down the pipeline of how you get to the New Age room. I bet this is going to be like everyone's where they started. So like at that time, I started dabbling in breath work. We started dabbling in meditation. I remember the first conspiracy film that I watched was called Zeitgeist. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay. It's about 9/11. Yeah. Go pursue at your own risk, but like it will open your own mind.
We went down a little conspiracy
about that area.
In 2020 when it was time to question all that stuff. And we've been down the rabbit hole a bit.
Yeah. Well, Zeitgeist is like, let's call it like ground zero for conspiracy theorists. where they start, which is like questioning 9/11. It's looking at the ties of astrology with mainstream religion. It's like a pretty intense film. I think I watched that when I was about 26 with my husband, and we were like, whoa, hold on. Has everything that we've been told a lie, basically? Right. So that started. And then in the pursuit of like, well, what is the truth? I went to juice cleanses. I went to Tantra festivals. I started doing ecstatic dancing. I went for 2 months to Bali, which is also kind of like the mecca of the New Age movement. And in that time, I started to heal the wounds that I kind of had from cancel culture and heal myself. It was really beneficial at first, right? Breathwork, excellent. Yeah. Meditation, excellent. Changing your diet, wonderful. Ozone, cold plunges, all these different things that come with the New Age movement. There's this beautiful light side, including the community of free thinkers who are like, we're not down with what's going on over here, and we're finding out a new way. And so as I kind of moved further and further into that, I started finding more meaning, and modeling just started feeling hollow. It's just, it's a world, fashion is quite hollow in and of itself. Before I knew it, when COVID hit, it was like overnight for so many of us, there was a big wake up, obviously, when COVID happened. And everything that I had subscribed to up until that moment became like, well, that's all, because obviously what's going on over here is like mad. People are losing their minds. I lived in New York City at the time. I chose not to get vaccinated. And that's when all of my modeling clients, and I'm not going to name them, but big fashion clients, dropped me overnight. And I lost overnight my career. I remember at the time I had quite a few friends who were in the fashion industry. I stopped getting invited to house parties because I wasn't vaccinated. I got, wedding invitations were pulled back. We started to lose so many people around us. And so in that vacuum, the spiritual community was the one that was like, guys, come this way. This over here. Sorry, you're going to talk. I heard a lot. This stuff is messed up over here. Come this way. And that was the only people that I saw around me when I would say, guys, a lot of this stuff isn't making sense. The way we're handling COVID, the policies, the legislations, the mandatory vaccines, this isn't making sense to me. And the only people who were saying, yeah, that doesn't make sense, was the spiritual community. And so what happened was, like, in that vacuum, there was this whole new world that opened up, and they were the only people that I felt safe being around. And so what happened was 2020, I knew we were going to have to make a change. I knew we couldn't live in New York anymore. And I knew modeling was probably done because I wasn't going to get the vaccine. And I was very clear on that. And then I'd had a dream about Austin, Texas. And it was like very clear. There was a baby boy in the dream. Whoa. I could smell him. I saw the sun like hitting his hair. And it was like I flew over the land and I saw Austin. And I'd only been here one time. And it just was such a like message from God that was like, move to Texas. And I saw my parents, my brother had started a farm. And I knew, for some reason, food sovereignty is going to become very important with the way the government's going. Like, we need to reclaim power over the food systems. So I called my parents the next morning and said, hey, I got a dream. We're moving to Austin. Will you guys go start a farm? And they were like, okay, how soon? And I was like, like now. And 2 weeks later, they found 50 acres and started this farm.
What? That's crazy.
I know, it's crazy. And then my brother moved back from Bali, which is where he was at the time. We moved from New York, and my whole family settled here. And everyone who was like me in LA and New York, who was questioning what was going on, they all moved to Austin. It was like they moved to like Austin or Florida. Some of them moved to Hawaii, but there was this big exodus from these cities on the coast. And they all settled here. And I remember the first time, like, I showed up at one of kind of more the spiritual parties. I asked someone like, hey, what do you guys think about what's been going on the last couple of years? And I was still censoring myself. Like, I felt like I was in New York still. And they were like, oh, you mean with the COVID vaccine? Like, everyone was on the same page as me. And that was not
comforting
at all. That was not at all how it was in New York. Like, I was the black sheep for sure. So when I settled here, I was just looking around at the community. I was like, it felt like such a godsend. Like, all these people think like me. They left for the same reason. We're all trying to do it differently. We've all wound up in the same place. And now let's figure out a new system. And they're all people who had kind of broken free of, let's call it just like systems, the matrix. They broke free of it. They're finding new ways. But a lot of these people were Tantra practitioners, coaches, breathwork facilitators. They were doing things in the healing movement. And that is a massive part of the population in Austin. Everyone knows this. So for the last 4 years, we've had such a good community. My husband and I, people are having kids. They're just wonderful people. And there is a shadow side, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is to everything. And what I've seen in the last 4 years of living in Austin is the beauty that comes with just such a wonderful, free thinking community and really weird stuff, really weird practices that maybe we've left discernment and critical thinking a little bit behind in favor of a new ideology. That's what I've seen. And that's like the pipeline of how I have arrived here where I am now.
Yeah. So when you're saying like spiritual community, you're talking about, you know, ayahuasca, you're talking about like these meditational practices. And, you know, for us, our belief as Christians, like Jesus, the truth, the word of God, like that is the light and that is the truth that we stand upon. I notice a lot of people actually as though we're not fully spiritual at one point, but seeing the darkness of what is happening and seeing that makes me like, wow, almost repulse and think to themselves like, hey, there's got to be something on the other side of this, right? Like the other side of the coin, there's got to be some kind of light and truth that we need to hold to. Is that kind of like what you were seeing? Is that what kind of brought you into that spiritual phase? It's like seeing that darkness and the depravity, and then stepping into seeking after that light or that truth.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think when when I was young and I went to the Catholic high school, I didn't resonate with biblical ideas at the time. Not even heritage. My heritage is Jewish. My dad would try to connect me with Jewish ideals. Didn't resonate with it at the time. And what we're seeing, especially with millennials and Gen Z, is we have this like collapse of meaning, and all of us are like meaning searching, but we're meaning searching in places that are extremely hollow, right? Like post Sex in the City feminism, it was like, oh, women's liberation is having sex with a bunch of people, or working a job and being a boss babe, and delaying having children until you're 40 plus, or maybe not even having children at all, or maybe just going on dates all the time. And what meaning became, the meaning became untethered from foundations. And we don't really have foundations that we agree upon anymore, because there's such a collapse of moral codes and such a collapse of like, what do we foundationally agree as is good and bad? And there's such a rebellion as well, right? Because we're like, well, these systems are bad and outdated. So the rebellion is like, well, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's leave behind everything. Yeah. And what's happened is this like vacuum of meaning. And I don't believe humans can operate in that for very long. Like what we see happen is when meaning collapses, we're like, well, I guess I could travel to Burning Man every summer and just work a job and accumulate money. But actually, after 10 years of that, it becomes quite hollow and it becomes quite purposeless. And it doesn't give me the fulfillment that it once did. But I don't have any better alternatives because I don't trust these systems behind me. Right. And there is no better alternative right now. Yeah. And so for me, I very much came from that. I was Silicon Valley raised. I was an athlete, D1 athlete, played soccer most of my life. I was really raised with like, you can do and be anything, but I didn't have the moral foundations, really. It was like all things are open. Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, all things are open and you get to pull from what you want. And in some ways, I still really believe that. But what happens is everything becomes a playing field. And that means you have no structure. You have no hard and fast truths. Right. And everywhere around me, with like where I came from in New York, I lived in London for 8 years. I grew up in California. I saw that same thing everywhere, which is like, we're all searching for fulfillment, but we actually don't even know the methods by which to get there anymore because we mistrust those methods. And so for me, when I started like searching for meaning and for depth and for fulfillment, it was, well, there has to be a different way than like the church and the structures and the systems that have been there for a while. And what is this new way? But when you go down the new path, you realize it's a hodgepodge of all these different spiritual traditions in the New Age community, right? There's Tantra, there's Hinduism, there's Buddhism, there's Christianity, there's Jesus has come back in Christ consciousness, right? There's people talking about all these different codes from different religions, and they're putting them together, but what's missing is lineage. Like there is no lineage that's like, here's how you safeguard this, because we have tradition and history behind it. There isn't really that, because we're mixing so many different things together now. And then we think that's meaning. But actually, it's missing really important things that safeguard tradition and ways of wisdom passages, right? That and rites of passages that we have to go through that have been vetted by thousands of people before us.
Yep.
That's missing. And so we're trying to find this new way. And then the new way is like, it's a rebellion. It certainly grew as a rebellion to COVID massively, I think. But there's a shadow in it. And a lot of people aren't seeing it. For example, a lot of people turn and have these peak experiences with ayahuasca, mushrooms, bufo, hallucinogenics. I've had massive transformation from these things. What they don't talk about is when you give up your body and leave and go play in the field of God, there's other things here too. There's other entities. There's other energies that we don't understand. If you aren't approaching this in a sacred way with lots of history behind you, with a safeguard, this stuff becomes dangerous, like actually dangerous. I'm not just like saying that. Yeah. Like I've seen people enter psychosis. I've seen people who do plant medicine every month because that's their peak experience with God, because they can't find it in the stillness. And then they get addicted to being with God in these plant medicine moments. And then they come back and they can't be on earth anymore.
Right.
It's too hard for them to like
it's like
chop wood, carry water.
Like an escapism, right?
Correct.
Trying to escape from the reality of the life that you've been blessed with right here. Now, you mentioned the chop wood, carry water. I really like that line in your article. Kind of that mundane, everyday thing that we do, like loving our wife, loving our family, loving our children, and providing however we provide together is just a beautiful thing. But being intentional too, like, you know, we need to be intentional about slowing down, meditating and praying and creating that space so that we can, you know, show up and be available for people on a awesome level.
Where are you at kind of now in your views on, you know, you talked a lot about monogamy and or is it poly?
I think this is, you were alluding kind of that shadow side of like this movement. You've obviously seen some kind of like shadow side. Like, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So do you guys know like the post that I'm talking, do you know who I was alluding to in that post? Do you know what's going on in the spiritual community?
There's like a podcaster you mentioned. Yeah, I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to go listen because I feel like I see through it immediately. Like some of the stuff you wrote, I was like, whoa, that's wild.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for your listeners, because we all love some tea, I'll spill the tea. So this carousel I wrote was in response to a guy called Aubrey Marcus, who's a let's just call him like a spiritual leader here in Austin. And he has done really great things. Like he questioned a lot what was going on in 2020. He said a lot of things that I agree with. I think he's a guy that's pretty a lot of the time in integrity in that he speaks truth, and he's, even if there's strong repercussions to what he says, he still values truth. And I'm someone that believes truth is the way and the light. So I appreciate that about him. That being said, he had a podcast that came out like last week, I think it was, that's just turned pretty much everyone I know in the spiritual community up in an uproar. To give you little cliff notes, and everyone should go like do their own research and like listen to it themselves. But the cliff notes of this was that he did a podcast kind of hard launching to the world his relationship with a half his age younger girl alongside his wife. And in this podcast, and I'm going to give you, like, I find a lot of comedy in this stuff. I don't know if you guys can laugh about a lot of the crazy stuff going on in the world, but minute 58 is where I just was like, the shriek that I shrunk in my car was when he said he was in Egypt and ISIS came to him and told him that he needed to impregnate both women.
Oh,
Okay.
My. Oh my.
Yes. So juicy. And I put it on pause, collected myself, resumed. He continued by saying that God has told him to basically do this thing. And that the most quotable line from this podcast was they had this guy named Mark Gaffney, who's the moderator, who's been accused of serial sexual abuse, by the way, in the spiritual community. And he said, he kept using the word, this is called radical monogamy. Okay. I have no problem with adults being adults at all. I have no problem with adults choosing what they want to do with their own life. Consensual adults, I'm pretty libertarian. Go do what you want to do. When we start calling things with different definitions that they are not, is when I have a problem. So it is not radical monogamy. This is not what this is called. This is called polyamory. It's also called a man wanting to have sex with other people other than his wife, which is a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Okay. So my BS detectors went off very, very heavily when I listened to this podcast. And what came to me was when we're talking about the shadow side, terms, definitions, things that mean something have become so leaky that they now mean nothing at all. And a lot of danger happens when that takes place because we don't know up from down. This idea that you can be radical monogamy, but be sleeping with other people other than your wife is not true. That's not what that's called, right? We also don't know when you say you get a message from God or from ISIS telling you to impregnate two women, that is spiritual narcissism. Okay. That's like, how do I know that this is not my ego or my subconscious or some other entity that I have no idea what that is, distorting me from the truth? And to position this like this is more spiritually evolved, this is where I have a problem. Okay, so one of those things I see, the shadow that I see coming with the New Age community, and this might be like super intense for people. Maybe people know what I'm talking about on your podcast. Maybe they don't. But one of the big shadow sides I see is acting as if all things are light. Not all things are light. Right. Okay, some things are bad. Some things are objectively bad. And if we can rein in the kind of moral relativism age that we're in, which is like all things are good. People just do different things. No, pedophilia is bad. Right. Okay, like being attracted to kids is bad. Beating women is bad. There's certain things that we all need to collectively agree on that these are bad things. Okay, this is one. I'm not saying polyamory is one of those things. I'm saying labeling something as if it's that is not one of those good things, because what happens is distortion and you stop losing sight of what is truth. Because truth doesn't mean anything anymore. Right. So what I see happening in the spiritual community, like let's call it the New Age community, is the twisting of words. I see sexuality being used as a vehicle that is not often used in the best way. When we start having sex with lots of different people to try to get to God, well, now we're entering into a blurred line area. Plant medicine is another one of those things. It's an amazing tool. If you have severe PTSD, I've seen war veterans overnight heal depression, anxiety, and PTSD with mushrooms or bufo, right? I've seen that happen a lot. I've had my own PTSD reversed through my experience with bufo. When you start relying on that stuff to constantly be in connection with God and you enter a place of psychosis, that is not objectively good. Or you're constantly chasing peak experiences and you just want to get another hit of ayahuasca because it's so out of this world. That's not objectively good. So there's a lot of these things that I see happening. The blurring of lines, the blurring of boundaries, the blurring of what is good objectively and what's not. What things have we been warned? Even in Christianity, I've been going to church and I'm not a real churchgoer. The last 4 months, my husband and I loving church. And the things that I've been hearing about, there's a quote our pastor said, which is there's nothing new under the sun. Right. And that really struck me, which is like, all of this stuff that we're doing here now, like it's been here before. Like
Right.
we've been here, we've had all these things before. Like we've had magic and sex and Sodom and Gomorrah and lines
Right.
getting blurred and all of these different, it's not new. What feels new about it is we feel in the spiritual community now, we're living in this new paradigm and we're more evolved now. So it is new. But I actually don't believe it is. I think it's
Right.
just recycled.
We think it is, but that's almost like our
Right.
pride telling us that we're evolving more and
Right.
we're, moving humanity towards a better place when in
Right.
actuality we're making the same mistakes that have always been made. So you started going to church now, and I noticed you pointed out on one of your social media posts that church attendance for millennials has gone up from 21% to 39% in 2024 from 2019 to 2024. That's a significant climb.
Yeah.
How has that been for you? And what are you finding as you go to church? And why do you think this is such a movement?
Mhm. Yeah. It's, I will say that it is a movement that I've seen people like me who are questioning the spiritual community as a whole. A lot of them like me also going back to church. I say going back. I never went in the first place.
Right.
I went to a Catholic high school. This is my first time really going to church and hearing for what feels like the first time what they have to say. I'm not going to reveal the name of my church just because
That's
I don't want
fine.
everyone
Yeah.
to show up there.
No worries.
But this church is lit. Like everything about this, I am like, it's like the music is good, the production value is good, our pastors are cool. Like it's almost like a Tony Robbins style self-help talk mixed with Jesus in the Bible. And my husband, who's an atheist, he's British, he's atheist, he's going with me and he's
Right on.
enjoying it and he's looking forward to it. So what I can say is that this rise in church going for millennials, and I think it's Gen Z as well, we're obviously searching for something true and time tested and consistent. And we're not finding that elsewhere. And so many people, to their own surprise, are going to church either back or going for the first time.
Yeah.
And I have gotten a wholly, I'd say 90% net positive from going back to church. I feel better for the rest of the week. I feel like I implement the things that I hear there. And I feel connected to God in a new way that feels just like really juicy and light and clean. I think my parents are surprised, especially because my dad's Jewish, like I mentioned, but it's benefiting me massively.
Yeah.
So that's all I can say. And I know I've heard some things about revival. Like there's a revival conversation happening in America. Like revival is back on.
Well, I'm going to send you a little goodie package from Kauai. One of my favorite books is going to be in there, and a jewelry piece with local shells. And so I hope you'll enjoy that because, Adam and I have been on quite the spiritual journey and certainly had our ups and downs. And I think just keeping in mind, too, that within the church, there's imperfection. And so that's why we need God, because he makes us whole again. He cleans up the mess that we make of life.
I think like with the polyamory thing, there's a lot of people around me in Austin who pursued this path. And what I can tell you from anecdotal up close evidence is I have not seen it work.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm always interested in like what's efficient and what works. My husband and I have been together 15 years. It's a hard thing to choose that person year in, year out, parent with that person. They leave drawers open. They leave toilet seats open. They're not doing the laundry. You're like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? And choosing that person every day is a choice. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that, especially with like the dating crisis that we see going on right now, like the paradox of choice is the thing that's harming people. And that's what I see in polyamory is that when things get hard or when this partner gets less exciting or when I'm out of the honeymoon period, there's other ways to pursue that hit of dopamine. And for me, dopamine isn't the be all and end all of where meaning is found. Meaning is often found in the discipline, in the responsibility, in the doing things that are hard consistently day in and day out, right? That's what I mean by chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
It's the thing that actually builds the field isn't like the getting new seeds to plant and try all these new different techniques. It's watering the field every day. It's pulling the weeds out. It's planting a little bit of new soil. It's doing the hard stuff. And so when we talk about this polyamory thing, if there are consenting adults doing that, awesome. Do I think it's the best way to find meaning and God? No, I don't. I don't personally see that, because I've seen anecdotally, I haven't seen it work. And in fact, most of the relationships, this is what I've seen time and again, that move in the polyamorous direction is they're often on the verge of breaking up right before they make that choice. And so I'm like, okay, so are you avoiding the breakup? Are you avoiding the hard conversations that need to? Are you avoiding the therapy? What's being avoided here in lieu of paradox of choice in this direction? And that kind of has been, growing, because we don't have that foundational sense of right and wrong very much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't. In some ways, the light side of that is like we're questioning everything that we once believed. That's a good thing. Okay, I'm up for questioning all things all the time. Be critical thinkers. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
And look where we are. Like, is this what? Like, are people thriving? Are we happier than we've ever been? Like, are we like more content or peaceful than we've ever been? No, we have the highest rates of anxiety and depression in the last 300 years that we know of. Okay. And like, so something's not working.
Right.
And so this whole dopamine chasing thing, which is what you see with plant medicine, polyamory, I see it when I've talked in the post, like some of the other things I see is like, channeling, psychics, mystics, all this stuff have great utility sometimes. Other times it's completely avoiding the hard work and the living on the real earth that needs to happen.
Right.
And I'm a big, like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like, I'm so into Jesus now, which is crazy. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that. And I pray to Jesus every day, and I really get down with Jesus. And I think I have to say, for the record, like, I think that happened when we had some kind of entity in our house. I don't know, this is like a whole other podcast, but there was something going on in our house. The only word that worked, that got this thing out of my house, was Jesus. Wow. Yeah, I just want to say that for the record.
I listened to a podcast called Haunted Cosmos. I just got to give context there. But
great.
they go into that. They're two like pastors, and they go into that realm and talking about anything from like Bigfoot to aliens to ancient structures and practices, and then they go and what a couple of their episodes were talking about like ayahuasca and different practices like that. But it's interesting because you talk about, you mentioned a couple times this podcast already about the ISIS. Who is that entity really that they're hearing from? Is it just their inner voice, or is there actually another spiritual being that is not a good and benevolent one that is trying to pull you away from the truth and pull you away from God? They in the Bible it talks about how the the demons, Satan, they tremble and quake at the sound of his name, because he has overcome. The most powerful tool they have is death, and Jesus has overcome that death, and they have no power over him, and they have no power over those who Christ has redeemed and saved. So yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, hold on to that truth and don't waver from that.
Well, and then so much of what Jesus professes and confesses to man in the Bible is so counterculture. Jesus, the description of Jesus, he wasn't beautiful, he wasn't strong, he wasn't one that like was of physical beauty, so to say. And the way he presents himself to us is literally laying his life down. He is whipped, beaten, thrashed.
He was shown as weak.
The opposite of what we want to be strong, we want to be beautiful, we want to be present ourselves to those around us as confident and have it all together. And yet Jesus literally was the opposite, but he laid his life down. And I think the more life I live and the more challenges I've faced, I've always have a sense of peace, no matter how hard it may be. I have a sense of peace that I have a God who loves me and has called me by his name and who sacrificed himself for me. No greater love than this, that he laid down his life for me. And
Mhm.
so, no matter how chaotic it may be externally or even in my heart and mind, I always have this sense of peace that God's in control and I can fall back on that. And I think life can be so hard and challenging and dark. We've kind of come out of a few really, really rough years, and it's just been, very up and down. And I think of like the one thing that feels and I know is so steady is God and his call on my
Mhm.
life and his promises, and it relieves that pressure of like having to perform or show up. I have that sense of peace that God's in control. And so yeah, I love this caption you've shared. You said monogamy isn't boring, it's holy. It's choosing one person over and over, especially when it's hard. That to me is sacred. Not a play party, not a download, not a frequency. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? I just love how you wrote that, and I think it's so
Mm.
beautiful. And you mentioned earlier you've been married for
I
15?
think it's like almost 16 years. I think we're
Woohoo.
at 15
Yeah,
years.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
awesome.
I think, and like, I'm probably the best person to deliver this message to those who might be hearing this and be like, oh, you guys talking about Jesus? And oh man, like, yeah, I'm probably the best person to hear this from. Like, I did it the other way and I know what the other side is.
Mm.
And when I met Sam, I was 20 and there was just something about it was like he said it was love at first sight. I felt it the next day. And we have like we were both really poor. He was like a British smoker, like libertine style kind of rocker dude. And I was just this young California girl, big, eyes for the world and excited to live my life. And we've stayed together all the time. So I got married when I was 21. Like that's insane.
Yeah, it's not normal
In a world where
nowadays.
it's not normal. No, we did it initially so that we could like be together for visa reasons, but we made it, right? We're not like there's no regrets that have happened here. But in those 15 years, what I realized was there's all this noise around me when the dating apps came out, and I didn't have a phone for that. Like I wasn't single in that time of the dating apps, but the chaos and the heartbreak and the ghosting and the out of integrity actions that I'm seeing a lot of people display on dating apps, I didn't experience that. And instead, we went through growing up together and building an investment portfolio together and going to therapy together and almost divorcing at year 7 and then making it through and then having a child and him moving across country. Now we live in Texas and what is even going on? And now I'm here and I'm like, if I had fully believed in like, there's better, greener pastures elsewhere, we wouldn't be here. But I didn't have I didn't believe that, or I don't know. I wasn't thinking about that when we were together. Neither of us did. We just knew we chose each other every day and we were going to keep choosing each other. And in that, like, I can tell you my soul is the most rested it's been. I didn't think I'd hit, what am I, 34 years old? I didn't think I'd hit 34 years old and feel true contentment like this and at peace in my body. And I don't mince my words. I don't say things I don't mean. I don't say things for popularity anymore. And I could only have done that because of sacred union. And I mean that literally, not radical monogamy, which just means nothing. I mean sacred union, like
Yeah.
being with this person where I come home and my home is calm. And I get to go out and do hard things in the world coming from a calm place because my partner has my back. And he supports the masculine when I get to go crazy and be in my hormones and lose my sometimes. And he's like, I got you, boo. That kind of nervous system comfort that comes allows me to really hit spiritual highs that I wouldn't have been able to hit before because I would have been so consumed by dating or go meeting other people who I think might be better than the last person I just saw. This is not to like shade anyone who's, I have tons of friends who are single. Lots of friends of mine are in their late 30s, single, starting to freak out a little bit because they're like, I want kids and I don't know if this is going to happen. We have a real like dating crisis going on.
No,
I'm seeing it
But
for sure.
Yeah, it's like it's a real thing. It's like a lot of my friends going through it. I also think that the paradox of choice is a real thing that you have to overcome. And you have to realize that like most time things aren't better elsewhere. They're better where you water it. And you have to water this relationship, and you have to choose each other every day. And then when you have kids, it just compounds, it intensifies. Because now you're like, we got to keep these guys, these people are like literally alive because my decisions. Like we have to be a team
Right.
about this. We have to be on the same page because bad things happen if we're not. And I think that hardship, those responsibilities, that's what, I don't know. I think that's why we're here. I think that's why we're on earth. I think that's like the fastest way to God. Because the other ways, they're like fast, but they only last a very short amount of time. The ketamine, the bufo, the ayahuasca, beautiful, great for like big pivotal epiphanies, not longevity with God. You can't hang out in that space. I also think like the insights that you glean from these little dopamine hits everywhere, like what we're talking about, polyamory and plant medicine, all these things, they're not a code to like actual longevity, right? They're just like, you feel it briefly and then you think you're enlightened for a brief period of time. And then you're like, oh, I just like saw God and now I'm like untouchable. But actually, if you were really like, first of all, if you were to really look into the face of God, your head would explode because we cannot fathom that level of complexity. But second of all, that taste that we get in these little fleeting moments, like the real work is to find a way to replicate and integrate that in your day-to-day life. Like show up for the job, build the thing, be a good parent, be good in your relationship. Like that's the place that we find this stuff. Yeah. And I don't know, I just see so many people turning away from that now. Yeah. Because it's boring, or I don't know why. Why do you guys think that is?
Like the day in, day out, while it might be hard and it's full on and it's tiring, to me, it's the most beautiful thing ever. It's not boring at all. Like motherhood is such a joy. And if you're really honing in on your children and viewing them from maybe like something like God's eyes, they're precious in his sight. And they're like, just this morning, I'm like, they were melting me just with their beauty and their curiosity and their quirkiness. And yeah, there might have been a bit of squabbles this morning already, but it was so beautiful. And I don't know, fourth child in, I'm definitely soaking up every moment. Like, I'm like, wow, my two youngers like just melt me with their beauty all day, every day.
Yeah.
As you were saying that, sorry, like something really clear, actually just had a realization myself. We're seeing like a sharp birth decline all around the world right now. There's a sharp decline in children being born. And I think about the dating crisis mixed with the population decline, mixed with this rise in new age spirituality. And it's a growing culture. And they all are connected to each other. But one of the big reasons why is because with new age spirituality, the focus is on me, right? Like the focus is on like, I need to grow and evolve as a human being to be worthy of a partner, to have peak experiences, to be with God. And all of the focus is still on me, and my experience. My mushroom trip was great. Here's what I saw. I spoke to Isis. That's what she told me. It's all about me. And so this like kind of drop in child rearing that we're seeing, you can't decouple those things from each other. We become so, let's like call it like therapy speak in our culture. We're like over diagnosing, we're over involved in our own issues, so much so that we're like, why would we have kids? Like if you look at kids from a logical perspective, it makes no sense. Like they cost an arm and a leg. You're going to lose all spontaneity. You're going to have so much responsibility. Like overnight, you're going to be like, my life is like not my own anymore. Yeah. You lose so many things. So from a logical me perspective, makes zero sense.
How was it when you first held your first baby? What did you feel?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I mean, maybe my experience is a little like right on the edge of doing this again, but my experience was a little different because I had a phobia. I actually have like a phobia at birth.
You had a really interesting phobia.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this birth?
I am feeling way more calm. I'm going for a VBAC. And so I'm like I'm more surrendered into the experience than I have been ever before. I'm not going to lie and say I'm like
Yeah,
totally chill and like all of this is great. And
for
like this
sure.
is not the most mind bending experience ever because, like you have like a watermelon coming out of you. Like this is
Yeah.
crazy. The last time that this happened, I was having panic attacks
Mm,
for weeks leading up into my birth, which made this like hell. Like it was a nightmare.
yeah.
And my husband had to like figure out backup plans and be like, my wife's not okay. What do we do? And so that birth was tainted by the experience.
Okay.
If I'm being completely honest, like, I thought I was going to die the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's another level of fear to be processing before you get the actual baby in the world. So all that was happening. But then when my baby actually came out and I had an emergency C-section, when I held my baby in my arms, I just remember like having an absolute like breakdown, just looking and be like, oh my God, like I'm alive, but you, and like, you just came out. It was so overwhelming. And, the first time, like as a new parent, I look back now and I'm like, you don't know what to do. Like I now look back and I'm like, at the hospital, they leave your baby in the bassinet, they like have that bassinet near your bed. And then I remember my husband and I being like, oh, should we just like leave? Like, does he just stay there? Like what happens next?
Right.
And now I look back and I'm like, that baby is never going in that bassinet. That baby's
Yeah.
on me all the time. Like there's so many
Yeah.
things I do differently,
Right.
Well,
but
that goes into like the
yeah.
disconnection from lineage. Like normally I feel like parents and people having children would know because you have your community,
Mhm.
your tribe that is like sharing that experience with you and giving you, passing down that wisdom. Anyways.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you're right.
Yeah.
Like, and no parent was with us in the
Yeah.
room to go, why didn't you put this baby on you? And why didn't you try to breastfeed? And why didn't you try to do these things? It
Right.
was like, what is a nurse going to come in here and tell us what happens next? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And so that was such an overwhelming experience. But I'll be honest with you, holding my baby, unreal psychedelic experience. There's no
Right.
other way you can explain it. Then comes this period, and I would say I was a very me-centric person. I was focused on me, had my goals. I'm going to hit 500K a year in my business. I'm going to be on the cover of Vogue. Me. And then over the next year of motherhood, you can't do that anymore. And if you stay in that space, you're like, I see a lot of moms who are quite depressed and unable to talk about it after having their baby. And I always go, okay, well, what haven't you mourned yet? And I actually had to have a little funeral for myself last year, where I had to mourn the things I lost and the version of myself that I didn't have anymore. And I really had to do that. And then I noticed after I did that, I became a really present, and I'm just going to toot my own horn. I'm a really good mom
Yeah.
I love
because,
that though. Like
because I'm present.
how beautiful you had to basically become more selfless and give up certain aspects of your life, but in exchange you've gained a lot more, and motherhood is that much more beautiful and enjoyable. And I feel like I've suppressed some of that in my years of motherhood. And fast forward now, like I'd say my fourth baby was probably the smoothest and more like I really embraced motherhood that much more. I mean, I always loved it and I always wanted to just bring them along for the ride, but
Like a constantly dying of
yeah.
that version of
Mhm.
yourself.
I find like I
that.
was talking with a mom friend. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we were taking our little surfing, and I'm trying to get my 4-year-old surfing. I want him to like develop this love for the ocean so we can do family surfs. And I was just like, hey, don't you feel the same sense of satisfaction getting them waves as you do for yourself? And she was like, yeah, if not more. She has more satisfaction in seeing her child catching waves, and we were just pushing them in. It was really small, calm waters. And so, yeah, I think, I'd love for you to elaborate more on just motherhood and encouragement for moms who are kind of like that boss mom who want to go and live life as they once knew it, but it really does have to change to an certain extent. I love this quote you said, what an honor to be somebody's everything.
It makes me want to cry.
Me
So
too.
hormonal.
We can cry together.
It's so cute. Yeah, I think it's been the most like humbling experience of my life. And I know that's a bit trite and cliche because everyone says that, but
Right.
I didn't want kids my whole life up until I was 30. And the only reason I changed my mind was because I had a dream about this boy, like I told you guys at the beginning of this podcast. And it felt like a divine summons from God. And I was like, oh, God, we gotta do it. We gotta do it. And now after being that person who had big dreams, big goals, having the experience of having to put myself aside for someone else. People don't talk about that. At least I don't have like moms around me that talked about, because they were all like, a lot of my friends are earth moms. They're like, I love being pregnant, and like free birth at home, and oh, I just love my babies. And they just like, they're so natural at it.
Yeah.
I wasn't a natural mother, and I had to renegotiate the terms of what that meant to be a mom who also like, I think I'm like kind of cool and I like doing weird stuff and I go off in my little jaunts by myself and I do solo trips, and I had to renegotiate what that meant. And the crucial bit of that for me, and this is probably pretty helpful for anyone that's questioning having kids or had it, I had to do that funeral for myself, which was I had to mourn the version of myself that was now gone. And no one talks about this, and it really confuses me, because once I did that, I became such a better parent, and I stopped being in resistance to my child. And I was like showing up as best I thought I was being a good mom before I did that. But now energetically looking back at myself, there was an energy of like, a little bit pushing away. And I didn't even know it was like subconscious.
Yeah.
And it was because I was like, God, I never sleep anymore. And I can't go to this work event because I've got a child and I have to say no to these things and I can't do all these things. But once I fully was like, okay, that version of me is dead. She's gone. She died. She is so far in the past. And now this is what this looks like. Only then did this start feeling so rewarding and so beautiful. It makes me want to cry. You know, like it's like the moments where you're like, I just want to like eat my child. I know that's weird to say, but like I look at him and I'm like, I want to, oh. And I couldn't have gotten there unless I experienced a little death of the self. And I guess that's like the summary of like everything we're talking about. It's like the self has got to go. Like you have to move from a place of like, who am I stewarding and who is this for? Because if it's for you, it's not going to mean much to you in the long run. And you're going to feel sad and lonely and depressed if you keep doing things just for you. And so now that the second boy's on his way, I know I'm coming at this from, you know, a different, maybe more refined perspective, and I'm more excited. And I also have now moved through the process of like, okay, this ain't about me anymore.
Right.
This is really not about me. So now I'm cool with that. And I think motherhood is an absolute privilege. It really is. It's a privilege. Yeah.
Ali, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and we're praying for you and your pregnancy that everything would go smooth. It's going to be awesome. I know it will. One challenge I would leave with you, since you like to go down the rabbit holes, like where we went with our spiritual journey, is going past the lights and the music and the production and looking even deeper into the roots of the faith and what Christ has instituted in the Bible. So I'll leave it there.
Well, that's why I said I'm sending her my all-time
seed.
favorite book that I keep going back to. I've read it like a few times now, and I lost it the other day. I'm so annoyed because
it's around. We'll find it.
Plus the Bible, but
I accept that challenge. I like that challenge. And I'll tell you before we end, like the one verse, like the one story I'm just like fixated on the last 3 weeks is Jesus turning the tables. I can't let that go. The idea of turning the tables and turning the tables in our own hearts as well, of anything that gets in the way of God. I'm just like fixated on that right now.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
It's talk about a journey, a trip, spiritual trip that we're all on, and to have your spouse to do that with you. I'm like stoked to hear that your husband's supporting you and on that journey too, because it's a sanctification. It's like a constant of like dying to oneself and a constant receiving God's love and sharing that with others around you. And thank you so much, Ali.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It was good to speak to you. Christians in an age where I'm opening to that now,
Yeah.
and also see where we line up, and help you see through some of this spiritual drag that's going on.
Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this conversation. To me, there's so much going on in the culture that mimics a lot of different challenges that we're facing. And, as we talked about in the episode at one point, there's nothing new under the sun, even though sometimes it feels that way because we ourselves are experiencing it for the first time. But we wanted to send you out with another scripture, Galatians 5, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery." So much of what we're seeing in culture is really burdened by actual slavery to self, slavery to the lust and the darkness of society and the offerings that the world has to offer. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, we want to point you back to scripture. And so Adam's going to finish the rest of this chapter at verse 16 to 24.
Yeah, so Paul continues to say, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another and envying to one another." So let's hold to this truth. There's so much in the culture. There's so much that the evil one, that the devil is trying to pull us away from this truth. And let's stay grounded on Jesus Christ, the word that he has given us to stand upon.
And I just wanted to point out one of my favorite moments in our conversation with Ali Hun was actually when you talked about Adam and Eve in the garden and how the very first sin was the temptation of Adam and Eve to become like God, to know things that only God knows. I think society at large is looking for something more and trying to fill a hole that is lacking. And so we hope that you can dive into some of our Diving Deeper series. These are all focused and honing in on our faith and the goodness of God and his word and his call on our life. And even more so, the grace that he bestows upon our life that is truly what sets us free. So thanks so much for joining in to All Things Possible. Richie and Yolan.